Now that your plates have had a chance to dry, we want to go ahead and create the area where we can put our strings for our evergreen weaving. What you are simply going to do is line up this guide that I've created for you over your plate just like that. So the paint is here, the guide is going to go right on top. Sharing this with your table, take turns. What you're going to do is pinch this nice and tight, and every time you see a black line, take your scissors and make one small cut on the blue painted plate. Little snips, just with the tip of my scissors, and you're going to continue doing that all the way around. When you're done with the bottom, flip it and do the last two on the top. You can then give this guide plate to someone at your table. And while they're working, you want to now open up your scissors, and for every small slit you made, you have to open up and cut right on the rim of this plate. So not all the way across the plate, but just this outer rim. You want to make those small nips and now make them a long line. Do the same thing to the bottom ones. You should have 2 on the top and 10 on the bottom. So now your plate looks something like this with all of your slits cut. 2 up here and 10 down here. Now what we're going to be doing is running the strings that we're going to use for our weaving. And so using just a little tail, you're gonna pull it. I'm up here at the top where those 2 slits are, and I'm just gonna give it a tail, I don't know, about 5 or 6 inches long. You're going to simply go to the very first slit that you have and run the string there. On the back of your paper, pull it up, and we're working in that same slit. I'm gonna go to the next one, working still on the same slit, and I'm gonna continue this until I have 5 strings at the bottom. Now that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all going to the left hand slit, now I'm gonna keep looping on the back, but go to the right hand slit 5 more times. As you're working, you're trying to make sure the strings are kind of tight, but not so tight that they're making your plate warp. So that's what the front looks like, and that's what the back looks like. I'm gonna cut about a 5 or 6 inch tail. So now I kind of have matching tails just like this. I'm going to take this one and loop it over to here. I'm gonna take this one and loop it over to here, running underneath the top of the tree. Now I'm gonna simply take my 2 tails and tie them together 3 times, just like so. Then you can take those tails back behind, just like that. And we're gonna take a piece of tape and tape those down. These strings that we just ran are called the warp strings in weaving. Now what we're going to do is choose the shade of green that you want for your weft strings, which are the strings that run across the warp. When you're choosing your green for the weft strings, what you want to do is take your popsicle stick, and on the end of it, you're going to take a piece of tape and tape the yarn to your popsicle stick. We need to load up a popsicle stick that we are going to be weaving with. So I'm just loading and loading. There's really no given number when you're doing this, but you really want to load it up, give yourself enough green yarn to do your weaving with. I would say that that's about thick enough. It's about the thickness of my finger. You don't want to go too much thicker than that. At that point, go ahead and cut the string. Now when you're working on your weaving, you do want to make sure to be careful with your plate. It can start to chip, and if it chips, when we're all done with this project, we're going to add a little snow to the bottom anyway, so we can always poke it out there and make a snowflake. Taking your loaded popsicle stick, you're going to go to the top of your tree, give yourself a 5 or 6 inch tail, and tie this off at the top of the tree 3 times. Go through one of the openings, and again, take a piece of tape and tape it on the back. All right, now using your popsicle stick, we're gonna start the weaving process. We simply go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, and then pull through. We're gonna continue. You can turn your plate upside down if it helps you. We're gonna go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, and pull through. When you pull through, you want to make sure your string is tight to the top of the tree. So I'm kind of pulling it up as I work and continuing the process again. Under, over, each and every row that you do, and pulling your yarn tight to the top as you work. As you're weaving and you finish a row, you do want to pull it tight and pull it tight to the top, but don't pull it so tight that it loses the appearance of a tree. You can kind of pull it apart and make sure that it's making that nice triangular form as you weave. Now that we're getting to the point where we can actually get our popsicle stick in there, every time you do a row, you want to take your popsicle stick and just kind of push that string further up on the tree to keep your rows nice and tight together. Remember once in a while to pull those strings up, but just not too tight, being gentle, just trying to eliminate any gaps that might be in there, kind of stretching your yarn, making sure it's keeping that triangular, nice shape to it, just like an evergreen tree. In textile art, you have to work with the material and play to its characteristics. So we're to the part of our tree where we want to be done with it anyway because we want to make a small trunk, and I'm out of green. So when you get to this part, you can go ahead and untape that yarn off of your popsicle stick. And I left myself enough of a tail. You want to leave enough of a tail that you can wrap it around your warp strings at the very far side and give it a knot. Again, we're going to tie that 3 times. Taking that little tail that you've got, you can tuck it under, and using a piece of tape, you can get inside of there and tape that to the back of the tree. Now what we want to do is add a small trunk for our evergreen tree, and we're going to be using a shade of brown to do that. Just like when you started with your evergreen color, you're going to take a small piece of tape and put it on that popsicle stick, just like that. You don't need nearly as much brown as you did green, so we're only going to load the popsicle stick 3 or 4 times. I would say that about right there is plenty. This time we're not going to work across the whole width of the warp. We want to only work right here in these center 4. So I have 1, 2, 3 on the right and 1, 2, 3 strings on the left that I won't be using. I'm only going to be using these middle 4. Giving yourself a tail, you want to tie a knot 3 times. Now you're going to take your popsicle stick and going under, over, under, over. You're only going to use those 4 middle strings. Take that tail and go underneath with it, and we'll tape it when we're all done weaving. I'm down to the last couple rows of my trunk, and I know that I'm just about finished because it's getting harder and harder for the popsicle stick to be able to fit. And so what I'm going to do is finish off one last row. Leaving a 5 or 6 inch tail, go ahead and cut. Again, you're going to tie this with 3 knots. If you do have any extra yarn on your popsicle stick, if it's a real small piece like this, just throw it away. But if it's a larger piece that someone else could use for a project, I have a yarn scrap bin, and I want you to put your yarn scraps in it. Make sure that all of your tape gets taken off of your popsicle sticks and thrown away. And now I'm gonna take my brown from my trunk and pulling it up the back side, I'm gonna take a piece of tape and tape that behind the tree. If you can still see your tails of your brown, trim those off. Be careful not to trim your tree on accident.